I am thrilled today to host a fireside chat with not only a good friend, and I consider him a peer, a colleague, and really a mentor in many ways. We are very lucky to have Jamal Reimer here. Just for a little bit of context, Jamal and I first met a couple years ago as we both were trying to do LinkedIn and kind of start a business, leave corporate. And I heard Jamal, I think it was on Scott Ingram's podcast, The Top 1%. And he was writing a book at the time. It hadn't been published, called Mega Deal Secrets. And I reached out to Jamal, and he was gracious with, connecting. And then we ended up doing some joint webinars together. What really struck me is I didn't solicit this, but about maybe a year and a half, you probably don't even remember this, Jamal, but you said, well, as I've gotten to know you, I trust you, and I want you to have access to my course. I didn't ask you for that, but you just graciously gave me access to your course, and that really stood out. I'll never forget that. And then I reciprocated. I don't know if you've ever gone in, but I went through and watched all the content. It was really good. And what Jamal does, I think, better than anyone that I know, is he specializes in selling what he's coined as mega deals. So mega deals are very large deals that are transformational in nature, done at the C-suite. And he's done, to my knowledge, at least 3 deals over $50 million. Is that right, Jamal?
Yeah.
Cool. So I think most of you guys know Jamal, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about him, but he's the author of Mega Deal Secrets. He runs his own mastermind similar to this program. And today we're going to get into everything about selling mega deals that you want to know. So welcome, Jamal.
Thanks so much for having me, and it's great to be here. I'm excited to be with a brotherly, sisterly group. We're birds of a feather.
Absolutely. And maybe it was 6 months ago, I went on Jamal and we talked about habits and mindset, and it's great to have you here and kind of meeting my group as well. So let's start first and foremost. One of the things that strikes me about you, just if I think of one word that jumps out, it is the word humility. And I just want to understand kind of why it's important for you to be humble in all of your success that you've had, and really where this value comes from, because that's really endearing when I talk to you and engage with you.
It's hard to talk about how humble you are. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, I'm so humble. If I'm humble, I think it comes from a few places. The one that is like top of mind is I'm used to being the dumbest guy in the room. And it's actually a good place. I think this is a topic that's come up a lot. Just I've noticed it coming up a lot. 10 years ago, everybody wanted to be the smartest person in the room, and now it's coming in a different way. You actually want to be the least smartest person in the room, because that means that you're growing the fastest. You're learning from everybody else who is around you. And in most of my selling career, I was selling stuff that was way over my own head. Like I was 11 years in pharmaceutical R&D software. And so in every single meeting, everybody else knew a lot more than I did. I wasn't an industry specialist. I didn't have a statistical or pharmacological or biological background. And so when you recognize that in yourself, I guess you if you're going to move forward, you got to take on that the right dose of humility. I think another reason why being humble is something that I strive to be is because it's just disarming. We're in the business of engaging people proactively, right? And not everybody is an outgoing person who's ready to receive an inbound, unwelcome, maybe an interrupt message from somebody, and not ready to engage with somebody like that. And oftentimes, not always, but I find that the bigger the personality, or the more of the push, or, hey, I've got a great thing and you should listen to it and hear it or buy it, more often than not will turn people off.
Mhm.
So maybe it's a personality trait, but whether it's just interacting with people or in a selling environment, giving other people more of the power and the control and the ownership of the idea seems to move the conversation on a lot faster. So those are a few thoughts about trying to be humble.
Well, I think what you said is interesting, and two things I want to kind of double down on. Um, One is just the growth mindset, which is if you don't know everything, right, then you rely on others and you're forced to grow and you actually want that. And I found, I don't know about you, but the more I think I know, the harder I fall.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just too many holes in my own game, right? Yeah, the last thing I want to do is position myself as someone. I just prefer to under promise and over deliver. It just takes a lot of pressure off and lets me do my best work rather than talking about my best work. I just try to do it,
Yeah.
and then it's a safer, more peaceful place to operate from.
Yeah, it lowers kind of the self expectations, is what I'm hearing.
And others. I want to keep the expectations of others relatively low too, so I don't over promise and then they get disappointed.
It's ironic, isn't it? Like the less you're focused on yourself, the more value you give, the more your gifts shine.
That's the hope.
Yeah. So to that point, a lot of people in my program, and I'm sure it's in yours too, think they need to know everything before they can go reach out to executives or before they can be ready to take on a big sales cycle. And what I'm hearing from you is that you don't need to be knowledgeable. In fact, you don't even want to be knowledgeable, and you really want to be in a place to depend on your team. Can you talk a little bit about like how you feel knowledge and knowing your solution and knowing your customer's business, how important do you think that really is versus maybe the importance of finding the right resources or surrounding yourself with the right people that know more than you do?
My sales idol, I call her my North Star. Her name is Marcy Akers, and she was a senior seller when I was a rookie at Oracle. She's still at Oracle. And when I and others around me were doing $500,000, $1 million software, on-premise software, there was no SaaS back in 2007. When we were, $500,000 to $1 million deals, she was doing 20 million and $30 million deals. And
Oh,
none of us could understand what planet she came from. And just a couple of years ago, I reconnected with her. And she was never my mentor. I never got to sit at her feet and see how she did it. So that's why I call her my North Star. It was always from a distance that I was trying to follow her.
mhm.
Uh, but I interviewed her a couple of years ago, and she said two things to me. One is that she learned. I said, "What have you learned, or what have you become that enable you to do these massive deals over and over and over?" And she said, "Number one, I had to learn early how to become comfortable being uncomfortable." And that was a whole conversation. And the other one, she said, "I'm a very needy seller." And that's relevant to this question. And I was like, "Oh God, you got to tell me more about that." And she said, "So really the only thing I know how to do is work with people. I just know how to deal with people." And a lot of that comes from learning how to be uncomfortable, because a lot of my best relationships with senior executives, they start very contentious because I'm challenging them on what they think they need to do. And I take them in a different direction. And in the beginning, it's a lot of sparks and it's not comfortable. But then they become really great friends. And, sometimes they'll leave a company and go to another company. Then we do another big deal, et cetera, et cetera. But about being a needy seller, she said, the only thing I really know how to do is work with people. And I've never been good at product or technology or process or implementation or any of that stuff. So I need people who are A players in all of those areas to fill the gaps that I'm filled with. And it was just so wonderful to hear that, because I think so many of us, if not all of us, as we kind of go through our own sales maturation, think we need to be the star performer on the stage or the star player on the field, whatever analogy you want to use, when in fact, the better you get, the less you're doing yourself, and you become not the performer on the stage, but the director in the seats. And you're putting the actors, dancers, performers onto the stage, and they're much better at each one of their own disciplines than you'd ever be. And it's through that kind of leverage of other people's capabilities and uplifting them and exalting them that we find our own success.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just thinking back to like the largest deals that I closed, and it was similar. It wasn't so much that you had to know everything, but you had to be the glue with the customer that was really tight with what they needed, and then be really good at resourcing and finding the right experts on your team to help in any areas that there were gaps or any uncertainties.
Yep, 100%.
So let's get into other qualities, and then I want to talk about mega deals, because like I said, I could have a conversation for 2 hours about values and stories and just background. But what other qualities? So you mentioned humility, you mentioned being able to be a good quarterback, and really people skills, right? Connecting. Well, let's dive into that real quick. So Marcy says she's really good with people, right? I think you're pretty good with people. I would say I'm pretty good with people. And I think of that as being kind of a chameleon, being able to relate and empathize and connect with various different types of people, right? Because a lot of different personalities, a lot of, different types of IT person's different than a finance person's different than a head of sales, right? And I know at Oracle you sell a lot of solutions, but what do you think, like, when you think about being good specifically with engaging with executives and how executives talk, speak, converse, engage, those people skills really become very important, right? They really become critical to be able to connect, to listen, to understand, and honestly, just to not try and show off and just be humble, like you said. I'm curious what people skills you have, or what you think Marcy or you or just some of the greats that you've seen, how do they engage differently with people? And is there any kind of way that you've seen executives engaging that sales reps maybe miss the mark in how they interact?
The biggest aha that I ever had around executives is when the first 1 or 2 times where I got to be in the room, but more like a fly on the wall, listening to 2 executives talk, pretty senior executives too. And I was just struck with how simple the conversation was.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be some kind of a pear shape as you rise in an organization, or you rise to a higher level of a person of capacity. The conversation, the terminology, and the themes become more simple, more refined, more narrow, and more powerful. And it's the folks in the middle of that pear that's so bulbous that use all the techno babble, and they've got to show that they're the smartest person in the room, that they know their stuff, that here is their value, and it's a lot of value because they know these big words, or they can do all kind of crazy charts, or long diatribes about this, that, or the other. And then you get up to the real senior level and you're listening to them, and they're just like, okay, so what'll it take to move forward? What's the most important 1, 2, or 3 things? Okay, I can do this. Can you do that? Can we just get rid of that piece altogether? It's just like talking to your neighbor over a fence, almost. It's just like, holy cow, these 2, she's got 1,500 people that report to her, and he's got 800 reporting to him, and they're talking about $20 million.
Yeah.
And they're just, sipping coffee while they're doing it. And it's like, and I think that comes from a few things. One is You can't run an organization. You can't be, accountable for so many people and go into the weeds. Can't do it. So you remain at the level of principle or the priorities, and you leave detail to others.
Mm-hmm.
And the mismatch between the executive mindset and behavior and the rep mindset and behavior is that a lot of reps, we're stuck in that middle part of the pair where we feel that we've got to show our value by talking and giving and doing. And it's like, a big activity vomit. And we talk way too much about our product and almost so little about the business itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we're trying to get every word in to fill up some cup of value. And we're doing the opposite. We're tearing down our credibility, because when a senior person sees that, they're like, oh, it's just a seller pitching.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than, oh, this is a peer in mentality, right? They're looking for the peer mentality to the executive. And when they hear it, they'll engage. Even if you're, an individual contributor, if you sound like they do, they'll engage like they do.
That was my next question. Do you have to have execs talking to execs, or how do individual, I already know the answer because you've done
sure.
it, he's done it, and I've done it, and many people, including people in this room, have done it. But how does a sales rep with imposter syndrome who thinks they need to be equals to an executive show up as a peer?
Well, there's two options, really. One is they don't, and they bring in others to do it. And the other is they do. And the way that I think about it is, what we're striving for is what I call peer business status. And I thought for many years that I could never be a peer to an executive unless I became an executive.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the seat for as many years as they were, and I had as many scars as they did, and been in as many battles, all that stuff. That's real peer, right? But then I learned that by watching other people engage with the executives, and they weren't executives, like my SMEs, for example, when somebody really knew their stuff, that executive would really kind of lean in if they had interest in that topic. And then I realized, oh gosh, they're getting peer business status, and they're not at the same level, but they know something deeply that's relevant to this executive's world.
Yeah.
And now the executive thinks, Ian knows something about something I care about, and he knows more about that little corner that I'm going to know. So I have the confidence to learn from him. So what does that look like? We don't have to be a peer in every way. We just have to know more about what they do in some corner of their world that they care about.
Yeah, I always tell people, you don't need to be an expert in their business. You need to be an expert in how you can help their business and the problems you solve for companies like them in areas that they're not aware of. And then they're going to lean in. So yeah, don't try and be a financial services guru if you sell the financial services, but be a guru in what problems financial services companies have and how you solve them and who you've solved them for and what is the typical most common things that they're faced with. And that's, what that's your domain of expertise. So right. I think it's a good point, having a point of view, being an expert in how you help your customers in your domain. And I think there's two things which I want to add to this. Number one is show up empty. You can show up with a point of view, but when you show up empty, when I say empty, I mean not needing to impress, not needing an agenda, not needing to actually just in service, where you're just there to help and to have a conversation, the energetic of how you are received is going to be as a peer. I don't know if you've seen that versus the rep who knows it all, shows up, throws up, but really, you're not trying to prove anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, that comes across. That absolutely comes across. So anyway, you're on a roll. Keep going.
So that's the first thing, is how you show up. The more you try and impress, the worse impression you're going to leave. Okay. The more interested you are in them, the more interesting you become. So it's the energetic of showing up to help and to serve and not having to try and sell. That's the first thing. The second thing, you mentioned you saw some SMEs talking to executives. The same aha moment happened for me with consultants. In consultants, we had a group called Ignite in Salesforce, and they were design thinking specialists and came from McKinsey, Deloitte, the like of those companies. And I remember the first consultant I brought in, he might have been 30 years old, a guy named Noah Flower, who's phenomenal. And he's like, I need to meet with your CEO. And I was like, whoa, this is at Berkshire Hathaway. And he's like, I need to know what the company cares about. And then he said, and that's not enough. We need your CFO, we need your CIO, we need the whole C-suite in one of these interviews if we're going to do this engagement. And that was just a prerequisite. And what happened? He got it. Why? Because he was firm about this is our process. This is how we fundamentally need to understand if we're going to help your business transform. We need to understand the different interests of the people before we get everyone in the room so we can and it was like, so it wasn't from a place of like, I'm a sales rep, I need to get to a decision maker. It was a place of really a consultant really wanting to understand their business in the different areas and the different departments by speaking with the executives that were responsible for those areas. So I don't know if you ever had that experience with consultants, but I noticed the way they show up is very different than traditional sales reps in terms of kind of like.
Yeah, one of the books that we read in my community is the McKinsey Way. Just to help understand the mentality and selling style of a consultant. And sometimes you can do the same motions with a different mindset and have a very different outcome. And the consultant mindset is extremely valuable for us at the enterprise level.
Can you summarize what the top takeaway of the consultant mindset is from the McKinsey Way? Like if you had to.
I'm getting a lot of sunshine. I'm just going to move to this other chair. I mean, one is they never really sell. What that means is they're always in the game of showing credibility and knowing the right people. So they give a lot away for free, right? A lot of their benchmark studies and their research and all this other kind of stuff. But they also know all the right people, either through working with them in the past or just through kind of a common network. And that's really powerful. And then the other thing is the way that they think through problems. They just go right to trying to find the truth of the matter rather than looking for a smoking gun.
Spending way more time digging and really understanding the source, the root cause, more time on the discovery is really versus the solutioning.
Yeah, just come and say, hey, I got this hammer, and man, I know you got 3 problems for this hammer.
Yeah.
But they're like, okay, well, what's going on here? And where are you trying to go? And how far off are you? And why can't you just throw more people at it? Right? You just push back. Sometimes they'll just ask really hard questions of the customer that would, lead to not selling anything. And then the customer's like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? We can't just put some more people on it. We need a real solution here. And so now the customer gets engaged because they get an honest pushback from somebody who is so disinterested. They're like, I got something to sell, but doesn't really look at first blush like you need it. Why don't you just do this other thing instead of buy my stuff? And then it's like, holy cow, this seller is so detached. He's really looking for the truth now rather than just selling his stuff.
Yeah. And I think, again, detachment is what you just said. That's what was jumping out. It's like attached to their success rather than selling your product. Detach from the outcome of like your goal and attach to the outcome of helping them achieve their goal or solve their problem. And they'll lean in to want to actually buy what you have or use your services.
Yeah, totally.
It's ironic, right? Yeah. Let's get into mega deals. Let's talk about first and foremost, how do you even define a mega deal? What is a mega deal?
Yeah, that hangs up people sometimes because when I tell my story, I got this crazy number of 50 million. And by the way, that's by far the biggest deal that I've ever heard of before. To me, a mega deal is not so much about it's a deal at this certain amount or higher. It is a deal that is 3x, 5x, 10x, 20x than what you typically sell today. I'm so much more interested in the jump than how many zeros are behind that first number.
So if someone did a deal for 500K and their biggest before was 50K, that would be a mega deal.
It's a mega deal for them.
Yeah. So
because you're so far from what became normal for you.
Mhm. Makes sense.
It's just a huge it's a symbol of your growth in either being detached to the point where you're really there for service, or your ability to find to find the problem that's big enough that it's going to cost that much to solve it, because the value is going to be so much bigger than what they paid, or your ability to engage senior people in a process where they don't let many people in. It's something like that that signifies your growth, and it just is going to turn into a deal that's much bigger than what you've ever done.
So when you think about like mega deals, there's two reasons people buy. Ultimately, it's to solve a problem that's causing some kind of pain, maybe a lot of pain, or potentially will inflict future pain, or to achieve some kind of gain, goal, or priority. And I know you talk about attached to the priority for this year so you can accelerate the deal into a shorter sales cycle, which we'll get into in a minute. But now I'm hearing find the problem that's costing them a lot and they're willing to pay. What do you think when you think about bleeding problems versus achieving a priority or goal? Kind of what are you trying to attach or find? And what have you seen as more like compelling for the client to move sooner?
When it comes to like, how the brain works and what's more motivating, running from a pain or running toward a desired future state, I think we get research coming out all the time that goes one way and then the other. So I'm not sure which one tends to be more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, what I'm really looking for, we're on the clock. We're on the clock every year.
Yeah.
And we got to make something happen this year. And then we got to do it again next year, because they're going to forget real quick, that we did it this year when next year comes around. So I'm always looking at the current fiscal to the next fiscal in terms of lining up what could be big opportunities. And so I just do a lot of listening, and the kind of conversations that I'm looking for are the kind of conversations that you mentioned, which are detached, showing up to serve conversations, very curious. I normally start these conversations around a theme. And if I'm coming in cold, then it's like, hey, Ian, I'm Jamal. I'm from Oracle. You never met me before, but I'm in a conversation with a few of the folks on your team or in your business area about X theme. And I would really like your input on it if you'd like to share. I got a meeting coming up next week with somebody else. How's that going? Is it a big deal, small deal, scale of 1 to 10, whatever. And when you have enough of those conversations, you can start to piece together, okay, if there's a pain that I can do anything about, it's going to be that one. That's where the trend is. Or it's an aspiration. This is not a pain, but it's a C-suite aspiration. So when you have enough of those kind of open-ended conversations, the pain or the aspiration will show itself if you're doing your discovery and research the right way.
And do you just feel that just based on the energy around how they talk about it, like a problem we have to solve this? If we don't, we're going to be in big trouble. I could lose a job versus I have to achieve this goal. I mean, is it just more of it? Again, I go back to the word energy, but when you see an executive enthusiastic or really leaning in, typically that's a sign that this is something that has a lot of spark behind it that you want to attach to.
That's the first sign. And I've been so disappointed after that first sign so many times. Now I know I need a second or third to see if it's real. What has happened to me quite often is I'll go really high, have great conversation, or get one of my executives to have that really high, great conversation. And then they say, yep, go to Cindy. She's my right-hand woman on all these topics. And I'm going to introduce, or I'm going to tell her to call you, or whatever. And then, there's crossing the chasm, like that book about marketing. There's crossing the chasm going from the exec to whoever they give you to. And often we die trying to make that crossing. So even if the executive gets all spun up and interested, if you can't take it to somebody who's going to execute, then all that enthusiasm doesn't mean anything to you. So kind of politely pinning down that executive to make it happen, or to make sure that you've got a way to go back to that executive if it doesn't happen. All these things are kind of some tactics to help shore up the likelihood of crossing that chasm. But so the first thing, absolutely, that enthusiasm, that leaning in, that's awesome. The second thing is, does it make it to the person who the exec says he or she will make an evaluation happen?
Yeah.
And the third thing is, do you still keep access to that main exec in the first place?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're doing what I call the yo-yo selling course right now. It's brand new. I'm filming it with the group. We just did it this week. And the whole concept of the yo-yo is who's holding the strings. You go down, but you have to make sure they're in control. And if the string gets cut, the deal gets cut. That's kind of what I'm hearing is get the path. If they're going to connect you to someone and say, make it happen, you say, hey, if it doesn't, I want to make sure I have a line. Can I have your cell phone? And can you make the introduction? And making sure that if it's really important to them, they're actually at least facilitating some of those next steps. That's so key to really having that.
And guiding. I would add, I know you know this, but guiding you. So one thing that I found to be really important is, whether it's me personally or an executive on my side, if they have that cell phone access, if they're on that texting basis, if they can pick up the phone and talk for 5 minutes and get into a habit of that, not like daily, but every few weeks, that they'll actually pick up the phone and talk to you or the exec, then you're in a place of confidence. There are not many people who are on texting basis with, nobody has a lot of people that they're on texting basis, right? So if you get there, you're in a very, very small group. And then you can start to take guidance, and you can share, like, I'll share, hey, somebody on my team is misbehaving on this project. I want to let you know that I know about it. Here are the steps that I'm taking to rectify it, etc. But man, that opens up the possibility to then go say, hey, there's a person on your team I need your help with. If you could just rein him in, here's what's happening. He's being a blocker, or he's not doing what we ask, even though you asked him to, etc. And that guidance and that, as you say, who's controlling it, but who can also yank on that string too, right? To make sure
Right.
the yo-yo.
That's why I like the yo-yo, because pull it back up. Okay, this is ultimately affecting me, and I'm responsible for delivering these outcomes or solving this problem. So I need to be a little more involved because my team isn't prioritizing it. Right. It is a tension. It's a healthy tension. How do you get in the door with cold prospects that are on your A list, your dream client list? What do you do to actually get in the door typically with executives getting to power early on? I've seen kind of the helicopter leverage your executives, and then it's the fastest path to the mountain versus being the mountain climber. I think a few people have seen that on this group, but like, what does that really look like? When do you bring in the executives? Do you try first? Kind of give me your playbook for cracking into senior leadership, when it happens, how much research. I mean, just the typical what you've done to be effective in getting into the door early with executives.
So the first part of your question was, what do you do when they're cold? And my
they're not using your product or service yet. I know you and I probably had current customers because we were at Oracle and Salesforce. There was some footprint somewhere, which makes it a little different. It's still hard, don't get me wrong, but let's just say the client has minimal footprint, or just in general, there's not a relationship, there's not a partnership level with.
So the first thing is, you got to warm them up. And I try to warm them up. I mean, a big concept that I think a lot about is leverage. Because we're on the clock, and because we're trying to do something uncommonly impactful or uncommonly large, it is not going to work in a 12-month period to start everything that we do from scratch. So finding leverage in people, assets, relationships, problems, energy that already exists is the only way that we're going to do something big in a short time. Mm-hmm. And the leverage that I think about when I think about getting to senior stakeholders quickly is they know a ton of people already. They trust a ton of people already. How can I get to somebody who they know and trust and have them introduce me? because the power of the pre-frame is exponential. And what I mean by pre-frame is when Jonathan Mack knows Asher Nelson, and Jonathan says, Asher, you should take a call with Nicholas because he's a good friend of mine. Asher's going to say, Nicholas must be a good guy because he knows Jonathan. And I know Jonathan for so many years. We've worked together. We've gone, through hell and earth and back. So fine, I'll take a call from Nicholas. Nicholas is now pre-framed by Asher, right? Positively, and all of the trust, experience, confidence that Asher has in Jonathan now applies to Nicholas, at least for that first shot. So I overinvest in warm introductions. I totally think that a unit of energy spent on a warm introduction is worth 5 units of energy of cold outreach, maybe more. So I don't know. I could go on that for a while, but that's my first thought.
And digging in there, is that people that can introduce you, or is it people that can introduce your executives to their executives?
Either one. Either one. I mean,
not a go-to executive to executive playbook per se, first and foremost, because I typically brought in executives a little later when I had some conversations, and I knew there's an opportunity when I wanted that mapping. But it looked like in the helicopter example that a lot of times you were leveraging people they might know from your company or at the executive level to connect there. And I've seen that a lot at Salesforce with other people. I just didn't happen to go to that as much.
I mean, here's how it went. I would go, it didn't happen as much at Oracle because I wasn't able, nor did I want to go to the C-suite at Oracle, because honestly, most of those guys are terrible in front of customers, and I didn't want them in front of my customers anyway. But at other companies that I've worked with that are a little bit smaller, I go to the CEO and I say, here's the deal. I know she's the right person, and I need you to get to her, either because I've tried and failed, or because I think you're a better fit, and here's why. And sometimes they would try and fail too. And then we go to our board member. The board member knows her already. And then the conversation is like this. Hey, Sue, I'm on the board of this company called Sama, and they're doing some pretty cool stuff. They just had their stuff used by Pfizer in their COVID vaccine trial. I think it's worth a look. Can I make an intro? I'll intro to the CEO. Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll take a half hour with that. And then it's a CEO to whatever SVP call. And the CEO just lays out a value proposition in half an hour and a few customer stories. And then, they're like, okay, it's at least worth looking at or not. And then I'd get involved and I'd run the rest of it. It doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes I can do that. But the first conversation, I want it to come from somebody who they already know. Even if it's a 5-minute, this has my blessing. I know enough about it to think that it's worth your time if you're interested. And that's enough.
Got it. So leveraging your C-suite first, if not going to their board and seeing what other companies because that person, that board member is invested because they're on the board here, they're a stakeholder, they want to help sell. It's essentially having everyone be a seller in a sense, the senior leader. I love it.
Selling at the highest level.
I love it. And it requires a lot of front-end research. Scott Leese, if anyone knows Scott, is doing a lot on go-to-network. He's actually speaking on this twice next week at Dreamforce on the importance of go-to-network for connections, for referrals, and why that's so much more effective than some of the outbound stuff that historically has been taught in B2B. So I definitely think I agree. And they talk differently. It's that conversation. It's that casual conversation. It's that high level, and it's that peer-to-peer conversation. So my next question, you kind of answered. At one point, do you bring in the executives? It's really whatever point is right, depending on the unique deal, right? If you're not in, you get in early. If not, but in general, I'd say executive mapping, right? Let's talk about, you're in a deal, you find an opportunity. Can you define what executive mapping is as it relates to like deals and why it's important?
Sure. So for me, I gotta put my my cord back in. I'm running out of juice here. Executive mapping is kind of like It's somewhere between chess and Stratego. I might be dating myself, but has anybody ever seen that game Stratego?
Yeah, it's the one kill that I remember I used to play as a kid with we're both dating ourselves.
Yeah, right. There are games that it helps to put your best player on the deck or on the field against their best player on the deck or field. And when you do that over and over, you're mapped, right? You've got peer to peer in all these areas, and it should be a fair fight, so to speak. Not that you want to fight with your customer, it's just an analogy. And so for me, executive mapping is really important with more complex deals, just because that theme that we talked about earlier, that the team selling is not being the player on the field or the performer on the stage, but being the director or the coach and deploying others. And that gets more important when the number of players go up, and the number of players goes up when the deal size gets big, because you need more voices to say yes, right? It becomes like a presidential election to do a really big deal, because you got to check with this business and that business and the execs and IT, legal, compliance, security, the list goes on forever. And the bigger it gets, the more leverage you need by using other people. And mapping comes in when you think, okay, here's a person who's important. I can't cover him, and I'm not even the right one to do it. Ian's the right one because he's an executive at a certain level, deals with the same issues that this stakeholder does. I think that'd be a good fit.
Mhm.
And you do that over and over and over with the key stakeholders in the process.
So in one
At least
mega,
that's how I think about mapping. I don't know if that's where you're
yeah,
going.
no, it makes sense. So in one deal, yeah, I just think about anyone who's involved, who could I bring in my team that could be a peer, that could have credibility and have a relationship with the partners, right? Like when I think of relationship, I'm talking about partnership, right? So that they can turn to them for, even if it's unrelated to what you're selling, right? Just a CFO conference or something. Do you have that mapping in a big deal? Do you have like 4 or 5 different executives mapped with your executives at the?
I try to. Sometimes it doesn't happen, and then the deal feels very shaky.
Hmm.
But the more mappings that are in place, and then I listen for the quality, right? I'm always asking, okay, how'd that meeting go when you met with the person I've mapped you to? How many times have you met? Do you have their? We go back to texting, and so do you have their cell number? Have you texted them? These are small indicators, but when you put it all together, it creates a relationship profile, right? And you can really kind of feel whether there's a there or not.
Do you
And
go to those meetings when they meet, or do you just connect them and then not?
sometimes, yeah. I mean, I don't have a formula as much as what makes sense in this situation right now. Sometimes I'll have a meeting where I introduce 2 people and then take it from there. Other times I'll just say, "Oh, you 2 should go talk." And especially if they're really different than me,
Yeah,
especially if they're types
you
that
don't need
are
you
quite
don't need
skeptical about sellers.
yeah, and there's no reason to be there unless it's like critical. You don't want it to be screwed up at that point. But if it's really just about connection and helping each other, then there's really no reason for you to be there. It's better, in fact, that you're not there in some cases, right? Just because they
Right.
can speak freely. I want to go on and on. I have one last question, then I'm going to open up to the group. Okay, and this is kind of a interesting one, but point of view development, right? Again, early stage point of view development. Gartner has some interesting research that says, the determining the path of, if you want to change the path of a sales cycle, teach the customer about a problem they didn't know they had and give them a compelling reason to take action. And I'm just curious, for the deals you've done, these mega deals, are you getting in with a point of view that enables them to essentially take a look at something they weren't aware of, and getting that visibility typically through a really, I'd say, compelling point of view based on research or what you've learned or whatever? Or is it typically you just get in the door and then they tell you, hey, this is a nice hypothesis, but we actually have these priorities and problems, let's focus here? Because that's what I've seen for myself a lot of times, is I'll get in with the point of view and that builds the credibility, and then they point me in a different direction and they're telling me where they're most focused, and that's kind of where the team goes. I'm just genuinely curious about your experience with that as well, as far as like.
I've seen 2 different scenarios more than others. One is where I truly have something new and intriguing that is either a new category or close to it.
Mhm.
And then when I can point to some kind of a process or outcome transformation that maps to this new widget, this new capability, that's very compelling to the innovative, to early adopter executives. So that's one. So the point of view comes from, wow, we can do the same thing you've been doing for years a very different way, faster, cheaper, higher
It's like the
quality.
innovative, very disruptive.
Yeah, the innovative,
When you
the,
have
the
that,
innovation play.
yeah, that makes sense.
The
Right.
other one has happened with like existing customers, where we're providing technology and or services. So we actually know the customer detail better than they do. And we can take data from weeks, years, months of working with them, and we can say, here's your reality now. And we can also tell you what it means. And we can tell you what you should do next,
Mhm.
because we know your data. We work with it every day. We know it better than anybody else. And so we have credibility that nobody else has. It's kind of a unique
Mhm.
place to be. And so the level of trust and credibility in our recommendations is high, and that's led to large deals as well.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And a lot of people don't do that. They show up and this, we're done, and let's open it up, start raising your hands for questions. But I'll leave you with this. A lot of people who have current customers are looking for the next product, the next solution, the white space, versus really digging deep into how their products or services are being used today, where the gaps are, what they could be doing better, what third-party solutions are still out there that could be, replatformed onto yours. The more time you spend digging with the current customers and understanding the data, the use cases, what they're doing, the more leverage you'll have to be able to make a statement of, hey, we're actually not in a strategic partnership right now, even though you're paying us a good amount of money. There's a lot more we could be doing. We need to talk. So
Yeah.
spend that time up front, really investigating and understanding how your products and services are being used to be able to do some much more transformational deals if you are an account manager or have current customers. Yeah, good stuff, man. I hog the fireside chat as always. Let's take some questions, man. We got Jamal here, and we're gonna go with Mikhail first. You can hop on, my man.
Hey Jamal, what's going on? Long time no see.
Yeah, like an hour ago. How was it going?
Yeah, so I guess my first question is a two-part question. The first one is are you going to come out with an audio version of your book? That's number one. And then number two was, as you were going through the ranks and, you're constantly trying to figure out, like, when did it click? Like, okay, I know what I'm doing, right? Like, I really have like a mastery or some kind of control over this, how I manage deal cycles. Yeah.
It was in, so you asked me this 6 months ago, man. It's still on my list to to do the audio version. It's still on the list. When did I know? It was in the middle of my second one. In the first one, I was just on this bucking bronco, holding on for dear life. And I can't believe we made it to the finish line. And then the second one, about halfway through, I just got a gut feeling that was like, I've been here before. I know this forest. The way is right over there next to that tree. The weather's okay. I'm gonna make it home. That's how it started to feel, and it came from experience, right? It didn't come from confidence. Well, I guess confidence can breed experience can breed confidence, and maybe that's what was happening. But it was like I had been on this trail before, and as long as the weather holds, which it was, I was going to make it home okay without slipping down the mountain. But I
Awesome.
don't know if that really answers it. Is that what you were looking for, or
Well,
can
I
I go a
mean,
different way?
in the detail of it, right? You're talking more about your experience, but in terms of the actual choreography, right? And understanding the customer's business, understanding how to position, what was it, what was the specific motion when that clicked, right? Maybe it was, maybe there wasn't one, right? Maybe it was just a mindset shift, but
I think where I came to where it was, okay, we've got the right executives engaged at some critical mass level. And even if we don't have access to them directly, we have it either intermittent. There's a critical mass of executive engagement. Let's put it that way. So that piece of the recipe is there. They're mad at us in the negotiations. That's important. Not always, but it was for this deal, because I was like, if somebody's mad at you, they still want something from you. If they're not mad, especially if they're indifferent, that's when you're in trouble. So when the worker bees and the mid-level people are saying, you got to put this in the contract, you got to take this out of the contract, I don't like the way you guys are they want something from you. And I'm like, great. If they're mad, they want something. So let's just make them not mad. But at least it isn't indifference. Now, those two pieces. So there was a critical mass of executive engagement and like heavy engagement with the worker bees to work this out. But you never know, right? You never know that the thing's going to happen. Every one of my big deals came down to booking it within the last 12 hours of the year.
Fun. That's why you retired from corporate sales.
I mean, we had a saying, which was, most of us were at a goose egg 364 days a year.
Oh my God. That's like my worst nightmare.
And from a health perspective, it took me a month to recover from the first one, and it took 2 months to recover from the second one. And in the third one, I was clinically exhausted. It stuck with me for a year, and crazy things happened to my body. I got oral herpes. You know what that means? Only babies get oral herpes because
without kissing anyone or doing anything sketchy.
Yeah, none of that. Babies get oral herpes because their immune system hasn't developed. So if you get oral herpes as an adult, it means that your immune system is on the floor.
Yeah.
And it was just crazy. Anyway, that's an aside. But all I really want to say, Mikhail, is that I never knew for sure. I was never like, oh yeah, this one's in the bag, because I was never there.
I think one thing to add, Mikhail, and you and I have talked about this, but there comes a point when you start to just trust yourself. You trust yourself. You've been there, and especially if you're working from a place of integrity and customer centricity, and you're doing the right things and you're working as hard as you can. At that point, it's like, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. I'm doing all I can. You don't necessarily know the skills ever or the dynamics or whether the deal's going, but you know what to do next. I think that's the important thing. So you trust yourself, you've been there, you've been in the right people. That's really more important than trusting your knowledge. I think that, at least for me. Cortez, I think you had your hand raised before you put it down. Did your question get answered? Should we jump to a share?
No, I just put it down. Good morning, Ian and Jamal. Thank you so much for your time today. Really quickly, Jamal, you mentioned when it came to engaging C-suite executives and leveraging your network to really kind of engage them for that credibility kind of standpoint, or obviously finding relevant company priorities through say 10Ks, etc. But what if your enterprise is say not publicly traded and you can't really find information around what are the strategic priorities of the organization you're selling to? And particularly I sell to CMOs. So I know when it comes to say conversions and what they look for, but particularly when it comes to the organization, I'm having issues kind of finding what the priorities might be and really kind of tie that problem to it. So what's your take on that?
If I can't, so there's research and there's discovery. And research is what we do on our own, scouring the internet for many data sources, from YouTube to press releases to investor. I mean, you're not going to get Investor Day docs because it's not public, but you do what you can by scouring the internet with research. But discovery means talking to people. Now, most reps think I got to talk with employees of the account, be they executives or worker bees or mid-level managers. But folks who really get to the senior levels go to the ecosystem. I mean, I guess Scott Leese calls it go-to network. I talk about the ecosystem. There is an ecosystem around your customer, and it's another concept of leverage, because there are relationships in that ecosystem that already exist that are not employee or executive relationships. They're partners, they're consultants, they're former employees, former executives. There's all these people that have some kind of relationship to the people who are in their chair right now at the company that you want to sell to. And they have the knowledge that is not presented in documents because it's non-public. And so that's why the ecosystem is so important, in having those relationships and creating win-win relationships. Because if you want to go to somebody in the ecosystem, there needs to be a win-win why they're going to share, unless you're good buddies and you're just helping each other all the time anyway. I think one gold mine is starting to open up with Crossbeam and Reveal and stuff like that. It's reps who sell non-competitive solutions to the same stakeholder type. Because when you start, and I don't know if you guys are leveraging each other in your community to help get warm introductions. Our guys definitely are. We have technology to, if you pop a name of somebody you're trying to get to, this technology will tell you somebody else in the enterprise seller community has that relationship, right? So when you get into the habit of being community minded, both in your Ian's community, as well as the ecosystem that runs between your company and your accounts company, there's so much knowledge. It's just a different way of going to find it.
Thank you so much for that.
One thing I would add too, I mean, again, LinkedIn is very powerful to see common connections within who sold there in your entire ecosystem, but become a customer if you can, or go in and see what the customer experience is like, especially if you have a retail or B2B2C, which I know for your space you can do. Jacuzzi was not public. I sold to Jacuzzi. I went into their dealers and they had several other brands they were selling to, and talking to their dealers and why they were positioning other brands gave me a lot of insight into what that experience was like for the dealer. And that became the linchpin of our solution. So, Jamal, there was one more question. Do you have time for it, or do you have a hard stop?
I got time for one more.
Cool. Ashir, you're up. You're the last question. So let's end on a bang.
No, I appreciate the time, Jamal. Pleasure to meet you. Believe it or not, you actually remind me of someone I used to work with at LinkedIn, just your demeanor and how cool, calm, collected you are, but how high level you sell. So anyway, it's good to see and hear your stories. My question was going to go deeper actually on those relationships, that concept about tackling the ecosystem, game changer. Curious about tactically what you're doing to build genuine relationships in the ecosystem, because like you said, in 1 year, you have to close deals, and maybe, you can go to someone else in your organization to get that warm intro. But I feel like if you want perpetual success, you need that ecosystem flowing around you. And I'm curious to know what you do tactically to do that so that it lives around you and, you're basically invulnerable.
You're wise beyond your years, Asher, because I didn't discover this until I started to age, because by aging, my network just naturally got bigger because I was around longer. And then I started to see, hang on, there was somebody who I worked with 3 years ago who helped me in this way. Man, what if I had more connections like that? And so we need to be in the world. Now, what I mean by being in the world is being in communities, in activities, be they service, industry, business, wealth generation, entrepreneurs, whatever. When we're in these networks and active and serving, people are going to see that. And then, even though I don't like the term, your personal brand is going to come out and you're going to be known for certain things. And the more you show the part of you, which is outwardly oriented and serving others, that's going to engender a lot of, whatever you want to call it, social capital, reciprocity, lots of good things come from that. So the more folks you know, and then the more folks you help, the more folks you're going to be able to turn to when you need help. And oftentimes you don't want to just look for who can I sell to right now. I try to focus on people of capacity. That's how I think of them. Who's the next person of capacity that I can engage with and I can help them? And if I can help them in any way, I don't know if I'll ever need their help, but I feel a little safer knowing that there's another node in my network, and my network just got stronger and wider. And then stuff at some point, your network reaches a critical mass that good stuff just starts happening.
Well,
This is probably a little bit too vague. So
It's not, yeah, I don't think it's vague at all, Jamal. You and I are examples of this. You connected me with Alec, right? You're here now. I was on your community. We're both with Scott Ingram. It's about being around people, because that enables jobs, that enables potentially deals, it enables, you don't know where it's going to end up, but finding people in your ecosystem that you can serve and help. And if you can't serve and help them, just learning from them and connecting and putting yourself out and offering your assistance, it goes it goes so far. And if you think about like Scott Leese or John Barros or Kevin Dorsey or Brandon or you, Jamal, I mean, there's a tight group of people in this kind of coaching space, Marcus Chen, and we all know each other. And there isn't a competitive, this is the interesting thing with me and Jamal. We can, in theory, be competitors, and some might say we are, but I don't look at Jamal that way. I'm happy for his business, and I don't think he looks at me that way, because we're trying to lift up the sales communities and be servants to people, to give them the tools that their companies fail to give them. We're both on the same mission. We're both trying to help people find massive freedom and success through this industry we call sales, tech sales. And so I know his mission's good. He knows my mission's good. We're going to help each other. That's what the ecosystem is about. And there's some bad actors, and that's not who you're going to surround yourself with. You're going to surround yourself with people who align with your mission, with your values. So with that, I want to plug Jamal. I want to give you a chance if you want to share any thing about the enterprise sales community or how people can work with you. And just, I know you're doing a lot of good, especially in, the space we're in for these large, complex deals. So anything you want to share with my community and with YouTube and wherever this is going to go about how to work with you or stay connected with you.
I mean, the easiest thing, if you want, just follow me on LinkedIn. The book seems to be resonating pretty well. And if you want, here, there's a place where I give away the book for free if you take care of the shipping. Maybe that could work.
Drop it in the chat if you want. I can also put a link to it when it goes to my newsletter and to YouTube and LinkedIn.
Yeah. Great. But I mean, my counsel would be work with Ian as long as you can, because he's got so much value to give. I would do everything you can with Ian first. After that, we can always talk, but you're in the best hands with Ian right now.
Vice versa. And there are people that do both of our programs. It's the truth. And they go to one to another. I think the more you can learn, I'm always going to have coaches. I'm always going to have mentors, and you get what you need based on where you are in life. That's the best thing about coaches and mentors. And you continue growing and get the next thing that is going to serve you at that point in your life. So with that, Jamal, thank you for being of service to our community today. It's always great to see you. I'm very happy for your success and, in the journey that we're both on. And I look forward to the next discussion, whether it's in your group or my group or just offline. It's always great to see you, buddy.
Thank you, Ian. And good to meet you guys. You guys have a great weekend. I'm sure we'll see you guys soon.
Sounds good. Take care.